Hello and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Swim Brief, where we talk through the most important news stories in the sport of swimming, or maybe not the most important news stories, maybe just the stuff that we are thinking about, and try to have a little bit of adult conversation about it. I am joined, as always, by a guy who's lost multiple swim coaching jobs without kicking any water bottles into any kids' faces, from the Pacific Northwest, Joel Rawlings. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Got a nice intro there. I'll have to think
Is that
about
confirmed? Is that confirmed that you've never kicked a water bottle into anybody's face?
No, actually, I've done that. Yeah.
Okay, but you didn't get fired. That wasn't the reason you got fired.
No, luckily the water bottle exploded, and so it was just more of a shrapnel thing than an entire water bottle.
Wow.
But yeah, no.
Wow.
Plus, I did that back in the 90s, so that was okay back then. It's okay.
Right.
That was back.
It was a different time. It was a different time, Joel.
Yeah, it showed that you cared about the sport.
Right. You're just passionate.
Yeah, passion.
Okay, now I feel like I must put a disclaimer on the front end of this. We are joking, but we don't condone anybody kicking a water bottle into somebody's face. And from down deep in the Speedo bunker outside of Houston, Texas, Erik Weichen. How are you, Erik?
Doing pretty well, thanks, Chris.
And you're protected, right, from a thermonuclear attack down there.
I am from my third-story apartment, looking at I-45, pretty secure.
Ooh. Do you have to pay extra for the view of I-45?
No, actually, you don't have to pay extra, but that's for another conversation.
Is there any property at all in the Houston area where you're not looking at a highway?
Only if you turn around. It's like when you coach outside and the storm is over there and you look over there. Yeah, that's basically pretty much it. Yeah. So just living the dream right next to 10 lanes of concrete and 85 mile an hour pickup trucks on lift kits with living the dream.
I just want all the listeners to know Erik had a better intro for himself. I just forgot to do it because I've lost, since he sent it to me. As soon as I started introducing him, I realized, Erik actually had.
It's all right. We can save it.
Yeah, we'll save it. We'll save it for next week. Okay. That's what we call a tease in the business. A tease. Yeah. That's right. All the listeners are like, oh man, I can't wait to listen next week. I'm going to hear that intro. This is going to be so good. Okay. So we're going to go right off the top to the topic I started joking about. An article came out, I believe it was Friday last week, well-sourced, according to SwimSwam, that Jeremy Kipp, the head coach of University of Southern California, is in some hot water, let's say, over a purported incident where he kicked a water bottle. That water bottle struck and injured a swimmer in practice. So, just dealing with what we know based off of this article, I think we're going to start with Kipp, but we're going to sort of branch into a broader discussion of the behavior described in the article. I'll go to you first, Joel. What do you think the consequences, if this is true, okay, what do you think the consequences should be for Kipp?
I think, I'm going to be very anti-coach on this, in that basically you start thinking that like an AD, you start cutting ties as fast as you can.
Yeah.
I would be like, this is, you can put all the things into place, like A, we're going to suspend you for X amount of weeks. B, we're going to have you go to anger management. C, we're probably going to start moving you out the door. I think back to I remember years back, and this is, completely off topic, but it's kind of on topic. It's like there was a Duke lacrosse player that ends up killing his girlfriend. So obviously kicking a water bottle.
I think this is Virginia. I think you're thinking wrong.
Okay.
School. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I said before the Duke people get upset,
They're always upset. So that's why I thought I'd pick on them.
Right.
Virginia's actually kind of happy probably right now.
Right.
But so obviously two completely different things. But what the article I read was first this guy had this offense, then this offense, and each offense got a little bit bigger. And so in the end, the story was, why didn't someone do something at the very beginning to initiate counseling or something like that to prevent this from getting bigger? And you have a place like USC where obviously they've got bigger fish to fry. They've got football. We've got basketball. We're big powers. We don't need the Olympic sports, doing something that's going to damage our brand. And that's exactly what sport is at that level. Is it's a marketing entity. And your marketing entity is messing stuff up right now because it's bringing attention in. And so they've got to do something immediately. And that's just how it's become. It's not like a cancel culture kind of a thing so much as they've got a brand that they have to look out for. And they're going to tolerate certain things on the sports that are going to bring in millions of dollars. They're not going to tolerate for sports that are, in their eyes, costing them millions of dollars.
Yeah. I read it, and I think, it's like I'm going to do a preemptive counter in case Kipp gets canned. And I feel like based off this article, it's likely that's going to be the outcome of this. There will not people I agree with, people who I think are quite wrong on this issue, but they will say like, oh, it's just one thing. Like how did okay. I guarantee you, all three of us have worked in a college athletics department. You are evaluated at the end of the year in any normal college athletics department, right? And then additionally, if they're really doing their job, they're conducting exit interviews with seniors as they finish. And I know every year that I was a college coach, there would be some absolutely horrendous, awful things written about me in those evaluations, right? That were not true, by the way, just so everybody listening knows. Somebody on the team really didn't like me, and they just savaged me in one of these. So administrators have a certain level of tolerance for them. But when you have an incident like this, I guarantee you that administrator is going to look back at those evaluations, and they're going to look at those exit interviews. And if they decide to fire Jeremy Kipp, it will be because they see a cumulative pattern in those things.
Right.
That this is not a one-time incident, right? And if it is in fact like he's been amazing and there's just one day he lost his mind, then I don't think he probably will be fired. I think there probably will be some kind of consequence. Maybe he'll somebody I know suggested this to me. Maybe he'll be like Jack Bowerly. He'll be put in swim coach jail for a year and not allowed to set foot on the deck. Although Jack was like sort of very specific situation because he had so much capital built up at Georgia that he could sort of withstand that and just come back and get right back in the swing of things. Kipp only having been the head coach of USC for a year. I guess, Joel, Erik, I know you've got a little bit of a conflict here. So I just want to ask about sort of the broader question here. Where do you think the line is with coaches and like a display of raw emotion? Obviously coaches are allowed to get angry, but where do we draw the line in terms of a coach getting angry on a pool deck?
It's a hard line. I've self-admittedly been frustrated on deck, angry on deck. Typically not a matter of more of a behavioral situation than maybe a compliance within a set kind of thing where people just aren't hitting intervals or just aren't hitting their paces or whatever. And we don't know the context of this particular incident. But I think I guess, I don't know. I struggle with it in totality because I've been on both sides, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is you have every right to be emotional. You have every right to be fully invested in what's going on, and like you said, sometimes that stuff happens. But when objects start to fly or certain words start to get used, then you're taking it too seriously. And there needs to be an evaluation of where you are in your life, your balance, and your priorities, because at the end of the day, the same thing with my current job. So, the full disclosure, USC is a Speedo team. I could get really upset about the things that happen at work. But the long and short of it is it's just bathing suits and goggles. And it's a sport, and it's supposed to be a fun activity, and we need to reevaluate things. And then furthermore, try to think about if things aren't happening the way you want it, well, why is it? Don't just automatically jump to anger if the kids are spiteful. There's a line of reasons that are good for why things aren't happening the way that you are. And if you feel that screaming is the only way to get through a kid in 2021, you are sorely mistaken. And a dinosaur would need to reevaluate how it is you think effective coaching actually works.
Yeah, I don't. Go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say, kind of adding on to that, is like, it seems like now, like when we use the phrase, like you're a dinosaur, it's the meteors are coming a lot faster now than they did for the dinosaurs, because it's like every year there's a new thing that's just kind of changed. I remember I read this one article about a hockey coach, like the first period they're down like already 2 goals. And so they're asking the coach what happened. He's like, well, I thought there obviously wasn't enough profanity in the first period. So I took care of that between sessions, and also he pulled ahead. And it's like one of those stories that coaches love. Is like, oh, I dropped a bunch of F-bombs and stuff corrected. And we love that story, but that's a story again of the dinosaur age, because this is a different people that we work with. It's we're creating learning environments. I remember a podcast with George Kennedy, who was over at Johns Hopkins, and his phrase was, "I just want every practice to be the best part of their day." And it's like, as soon as I heard that, like, that's such an awesome quote from an awesome coach. That it's exactly it. And then you stop and you start to reflect on what your actions were. Like, well, I kicked that water bottle. How did that improve that kid's day? How did that improve our swimming that day? And we all have those moments. But like you also said, Chris, is we try to build up enough capital where, you kind of, I used to start the season basically like, at some point I'm going to say something, where I might try to be funny and it's going to be offensive. And let me just tell you, kids, I really care about you guys as people. I really honestly do. And if you ever feel that way, or if I've ever said something that might come off wrong, please come up and talk to me about it. Because I really I want them to create an educational opportunity for me as much as for them, how to deal with someone that would be in a sense of supervisor role that you don't agree with them, that instead of going, what we need to do? We need to go right to your boss. Like, why don't we talk things out too? So not to try to cover my own tracks or anything like that, but it's a changing landscape, and it's changing by the second, and coaches need to be on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is probably something that I feel like in my own coaching, I've gotten better at this year. There's plenty of place for a hard conversation, a conversation that, an athlete's not going to like. I think people tend to, one of the mistakes people tend to make even when they read an article like this is they tend to jump to like, oh, well, we can't be tough on kids anymore. Like, no, yes, you can definitely still be tough on people that you are coaching, but like to speak to them like an adult should talk to people that they are coaching. Like, speak to them and keep it directed at, like, what is the behavior you want them to change? Why do you want them to change it? If they're not swimming hard enough, what are their goals? Tell them that you think they need to swim faster to achieve their goals. Give them advice on how to swim faster. Like, there's so many other coaching tools besides the
nuclear bomb,
the nuclear rage fest, right? And all that is, when we talk about dinosaurs, all that's being taken away is the nuclear rage fest, which is really just an abusive way of coaching. That's what, when I tagged blog posts back when I used to be a writer and didn't just, now I do all audio essays. But I used to tag them dark ages. Whenever I was writing about something where I was like, someday we're going to look back in sport, we're going to go, wow, this behavior was tolerated. Like, how is that possible? Because we're doing it right now. We're looking back at a lot of stuff. But what we don't understand is that there's still stuff going on today that in the future we'll go, how, why, what was going on? All right. I think we've done that one to the fullest. I want to talk about everybody's favorite corrupt swimming federation. Well, I actually don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. My favorite corrupt swimming federation, Brazil. Okay. Brazil recently held a meet to select some swimmers for their Olympic team, and also known as an Olympic trials, for people out there who want the real swimming lingo. And they swam the 100 freestyle final. They chose a 4x100 relay. But then, oops, the guy who won the 100 freestyle got a doping sanction, right? And I think, your sort of expected outcome there would have been that, okay, they'll just take the next 4 guys. They'll take the second, because they've got guys who have FINA A time standards in the first 2 spots. So they take the first 2 guys, and then the second through 5th will be the relay. Well, that's not what Brazil did. Okay. They allowed a swimmer, Gabriel Santos, who had finished 9th in the prelims. So he hadn't qualified for the final, to swim a time trial. And he finished his time trial, went 48.4 in the race. And then they selected him to be not only an individual, the second individual they're going to have in the 100 free, but they took the 5th place finisher. So he didn't displace somebody for individual. I'm making sure I get all the pieces of the story right. So they added another individual swimmer, but what he did was displace the 5th place finisher who had done 48.8 in the final. So in 48.4 in the time trial. I hope by now I've explained this whole mess. I'm going to go to Erik first. What do you think of what the heck is going on with this Brazilian selection?
I appreciate the sentiment. The guy kind of got a raw deal. But
who got a raw deal?
9th place. If he was officially doping, I've not seen any news as far as his B sample, other than the fact that this is actual anabolic steroid that is in his system. But that's that little raw deal. But yeah, in reality, 5th place, made the final, and got through it all, and rightfully so, earned his spot on the relay. I don't know enough about Brazil's team. I know that the U.S., there's the opportunity to be able to take 6. I guess Brazil's not in that place right now with the top end sprinters to be able to take more than 4. But it's just kind of a wild shoot from the hip. Do they even have rules in Brazil? I mean, it's like, we'll just create a time trial for a guy to swim by himself without anything there, or whether it's the pressure of a final, because we don't know how this guy performs. Like, this is really just kind of a lab situation for it. And it's just another thing that's happening there in Brazil. And I just kind of scratch my head, like, just take what you had in the top 8, take 2 through 5, and be on with it. And Brazil is kind of tied for Mexico with corruption, I think, when it comes to.
Well, what about Uzbekistan? Uzbekistan's making a strong play.
One. Yeah, well, they're trying to deny that one guy said that they were, lying about times and whatnot, being dishonest. But yeah, it's just they're all competing for the top of this heap. Right. Well, they're competing for second. Let's be honest. Right. Russia is at the top of this dung heap of corruption and
Forgot
cheating.
about Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. Can never forget about them. Ace of spades.
Gosh. They win just on volume and getting away with it. Like they're the best at getting away with it. No, you know what I thought of when I read this? I just thought of, like, one point I want to make to all the listeners is, especially if you're an American listener, just understand that the U.S. Olympic trials are trials method of choosing an Olympic team is probably the most objective way of selecting an Olympic swim team in the world. The rest of the world, when you say like, I don't know what the rules are, the truth is there's a lot of subjective stuff out there. Just look at Canada, like just north of us, just decided like, oh yeah, trials is later. But these people, they've already qualified, and we don't really know where trials is going to be. And maybe we'll have it in the country. Maybe we won't have it in the country. And there's just going to be shenanigans in the whole rest of the world picking this stuff. And I think it does real harm to the competitive environment, right? Because nobody really knows whether it's fair. It's hard to figure out what was fair in this situation. I mean, the guy missed a final, but somebody ahead of him was cheating. So then he didn't get the opportunity to swim in the final. I think from a pure swimming perspective, I don't think this is a good decision. Like, I am more impressed by a guy going 48.8 with a competitive final around him, and waves and all that stuff, than somebody time trialing by themselves in a pool and going 48.4. I just think I think they've actually hurt their relay by making this decision. I kind of understand it. They probably want the second individual qualifier. What do you think, Joel? I mean, you've never coached a Brazilian Olympian, but still, you must have some kind of opinion.
I got opinions on everything. I think there's a lot of things that you could unpack on this, because obviously, like, most people that are listening to this are like, I don't give a crap about Brazil swimming, because they're not like an international player. I think that, there's a lot of things like we've seen at the local level where a kid trying to make trials, all of a sudden, like, there's pools that are kind of renowned for having a current to them. And all of a sudden the time trial kid that you want to get that, all of a sudden they're in lane, on one of those outside lanes. Hey, how come he's not in the middle? Isn't that the fast lane? Like, and then for a 50, all of a sudden, hey, he made the cut and never made it again. We've seen that, but that's obviously not for, pushing someone else out of an Olympic spot. It's kind of, we see that a lot on every kind of level, but when I look at this, I think back to like the Rio Olympics, when all the swimmers and the athletes were going crazy about, should these athletes be banned? Should they not be banned? I think the problem goes even higher up, where when you feel like there aren't any rules in place, then people that shouldn't be enforcing the rules feel like, well, this isn't fair, so I'm going to start enforcing it. So we kind of saw like, the Lily King thing in Rio. And now we've got with Brazil, maybe they're like, you know what? Most of the world's cheating anyway. We're going to put our best people on like this, and we don't really care. Because again, I think there's so much kind of, in a sense, lawlessness throughout the whole swimming world that people just start going, fine, I'm going to take this in my own hands. And rather than going, we'll take the high road about it, we're going to be like, we're going to do our thing to match up. Kind of the whole Lance Armstrong, he's doping because everyone else is doping, and therefore I'm going to dope, and therefore it becomes right.
Right.
And you hear a lot of the finger pointing, you hear a lot of the stories about, well, I think this guy. And so that's the problem, is when there isn't a governing body, or WADA is not in a position where they're viewed as an authority anymore, I think this is kind of what happens from it. And it just is going to continue to devolve until there becomes a standard that all the athletes and all the coaches like, all right, we trust in this. And I don't know, obviously, if you can ever get to that point. But I think this is the outcome of everything that's happened since the Rio Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild situation. It makes me grateful I guess I'm grateful ahead of time that this is unlikely to play out at our own Olympic trials. And I think you got a good point too there about Erik, about the top six versus top four. A top six selection would at least let these guys race it out in like reasonably fair conditions for a spot. But I think again, we're probably one of the few countries that puts enough funding in to bring potentially relay only swimmers to an Olympic event. And I gather this is probably a money issue in Brazil. that there's just, there's not enough money for 6 guys, even though they maybe could use 6 guys in that final. All right. So finally, turn to an article here all about the IOC, this Rule 50, all about sort of, I don't know how I want to phrase it, but athletic expressions of political viewpoints. This, of course, has been a hot topic over the last few years. We've seen it domestically in the U.S. over the athletes that have kneeled during the national anthem. We've seen some stuff at international championship events. Of course, there's the really famous display, I think, back in Mexico City, 1968, right. On the podium there with the individual raised black gloves. So I just want to get, before we get too deep into the article, what do you think about the sort of separation of sport and politics and the current debate on it, Joel?
I think the Olympics in general was based on politics. For them to all of a sudden, politics aren't involved. It's like, that's why you created it. That's the whole reason it was in place. And my view now is that it's not so much we don't want politics. We want more corporate money is all what we really want. And we don't want you messing with our revenue stream.
Right.
So I read all the time about people saying, well, I'm tired of watching football because of this or basketball because of that. It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But it's one of those deals where for them to start to say that, it's like, again, it's kind of like what we talked about with the Kipp incident. Athletes now are different than they were before. Well, actually, no, probably athletes are about the same. It's just now they're realizing where their voice is, because they realize, like, again, in the Olympics for swimming, our sport is relevant every 4 years. All of a sudden we're on the glam. And that's the opportunity for some of these people. This is the one stage I have. I work my life at. I'm going to say something. And for me, I've always respected that, because you look at how that's basically they know it's a bomb to their ability to make money through corporations. All of a sudden, if they become too controversial, you're not making any money. And especially in a sport like swimming, you got every 4 years. I think this is the only time people are going to listen to them, and so they're going to take that opportunity. And for them to try to say, for the governing bodies to say, don't bring politics into it, it's always been politics. It's just they don't want individuals bringing up politics that might mess with their revenue stream.
Right. Erik, you work for a mega corporation. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I agree with Joel's last point. That's a dollar sign thing. It's people start getting uncomfortable. And that's really what a lot of this just seems to boil down to, is that these particular athletes' beliefs, and it seems to be a lot about social injustice, is that it makes people uncomfortable, and they don't like being uncomfortable. And then it's put on this giant stage where they have the opportunity to make people see it, and then at least kind of have that thought. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are the most vocal just express the fact that they're not interested in that internal dialogue. But it needs to happen. If it's not happening on the podium, then there needs to be some kind of opportunity for these athletes to maybe speak to it. I personally have no issue with an athlete expressing themselves on a podium in a respectful manner. And what I mean by that is not having some kind of inflammatory statement, on a shirt, or making some kind of obscene gesture. And whether you think kneeling during a song is a gesture like that, then we have to remember also that we're not supposed to have our flag horizontal. Our flag is not supposed to touch the ground. Our flag is not supposed to be on apparel or hats or anything like that. So just keep that in mind when we get angry about people doing things during our national anthem. But yeah, I think it's fantastic that athletes are taking this step and really, I mean, they're putting themselves out there. This, like Joel said, this could end a lot of their professional opportunities, but they feel so strongly about something that they're willing to put themselves out there. And I commend an athlete who's willing to do that, who's willing to show the rest of the world what might be happening in their corner or their small third world country that they've been training in and around arterial shell holes and walls and grounds and stuff like that. You know, it's like Joel said, it's their opportunity. It's their one chance, and they want help, and to be that motivated to speak in that moment or show some kind of sign in that moment is just, it's so powerful, and it's really impressive. Like, I don't really know what else to say about it other than I'm really impressed by the athletes at large right now saying the things that they are and doing what they do.
Yeah. I mean, look, I understand the people out there who say that, you know, I understand, like, and if I could summarize their position, the stick to sports people who just say, like, you know, I just want my sports for sports, and I don't want to hear any political discourse and this, that, and the other thing. I understand those people. I just think they're wrong. Okay. You know, and because it's not like there's a vacuum there, right? So if athletes are not expressing themselves, a political viewpoint is expressed, whether they do it or not, right? Something is passively accepted. And I think Joel's point goes to the fact that, you know, if individual athletes are not expressing stuff, then whose viewpoints get expressed? The viewpoints of Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola's political viewpoints, which, yes, maybe they're extremely well calculated to, you know, occupy this sort of thin middle slice that will not alienate anybody. So they won't feel like, you know, they're feeding into one system or another by being willing to, you know, drink a can. But that's still something, even if it seems essentially neutral or middle of the road or whatever. So, you know, you can, these sports governing bodies can do whatever they want to try and crack down on this kind of individual expression, but it's not going to keep politics out of sports. It's not going to separate these two things. It's just going to disproportionately favor the politics of certain large organizations over the politics of individuals. And I think if I could pretend I'm a politician now, that's not what we stand for in America. Okay. Was that good? What do you think?
That was awesome.
Convincing?
I like it.
Like, I think, you know, if we, like, sometimes what we try to do is separate out sports swimming, because, like, so many people that listen to this or us, we always get so wrapped up in swimming that we view only that. If you take a different sport and put it in, you take like basketball with Lithuania back in the 90s. I mean, I had no idea the things that were going on in that country until all of a sudden you start hearing about the basketball team. And so in a sense, I think politics can be very, very good in sport, because it does call attention to things that all of a sudden I had no idea these things are going on. And so there can be a lot of really good things that come from it. And you look also, like, Nike has been trying to capitalize in on basically the political discourse, you know, a lot of their ad campaigns. So while you're killing our chance at making Coca-Cola dollars on this podcast, I'm trying to pump back in with Nike. Okay.
Yeah.
So
let's do it.
And also I'm looking
give me that Nike money. I'll say whatever they want me to say, Joel.
And I'm hoping you didn't kill any chances I have to move to Canada when I need health care. So thanks again, Chris, for ruining that opportunity for me. So I'm just looking at non-top politics coming from you. They're killing opportunities for me.
All right. Well, let's round this up by killing everybody's opportunity to turn off this podcast because the end is so compelling that you always feel like you've got to listen all the way until, Erik makes his final point, Joel makes his final point, and then Chris comes in with the hammer. Erik, what do you got for your parting shot this week?
Again, everything that I've expressed today are my opinions and not that of my current employer and hopefully future employer, Speedo North America, Pentland Corporation, formerly PVH Corporation. I've been doing a bit more reading. The last time one of the last couple of pods here, I suggested books. I'm currently about 2/3 of the way through Adam Grant's Think Again, and I cannot say enough about this book that's positive when it comes to coaching and it comes to being just a general citizen.
My wife's reading that one too, Joel. Sorry, Erik. She's reading it concurrently with you.
Yeah, it's so great, and the reason why it's so great is it makes you consider other people. It makes you approach situations in a way that maybe you wouldn't approach it to begin with in order to get some of that change. So we talked about the idea behind screaming at athletes versus communicating to athletes and then trying to get them to change. And that's really what this book is all about. So if you are a coach who is looking for a way to reach some of your athletes, you got some athletes that you're stuck on, or you're just interested in improving yourself and your ability to think about things differently, like, for example, USRPT versus WorkWorks. That's a conversation that you can have internally and then actually have a conversation with somebody the correct way in order to have dialogue and find out where you actually align. So, again, it's not just because we have the same haircut. If you've ever seen Adam Grant, we have a little bit of a similar style. But yes, please, by all means, look at improving your life in and outside of your job as a coach and consider this book.
Adam Grant's Think Again is a diver.
He was,
on Harvard swimming.
Yeah, a pretty solid junior national level diver.
Yep. The guy whose basement I sleep in twice a week down here in South Jersey was a teammate of his. Doesn't remember him at all. That's, I guess, my buddy's loss. All right, Joel, what you got?
I'll be quick. I like following Greg Earhart, his tweets, especially through college swimming. He put out something just the other day about how teams should kind of look into starting to reserve, Twitter and other domains and things like that, where it's like blank, save, swim, dive. It basically to boil it down was, he said that you don't never want to put together a first aid kit when you need the emergency. So basically the idea of like getting ahead of everything else that might be coming and starting to put together these Twitters and these emails, et cetera, where you're going to be like, save our sport. Because I think too many of us as coaches keep on thinking, well, the Olympics have always been around when I've been around, college swimming's always been around when I've been around, therefore it'll keep on going. And I've talked to Greg a couple of times. He's like, 4 to 8 years, we might be watching, gaming on Olympics, rather, video gaming, rather than a lot of the other sports. Because a lot of sports that are more European dominated, modern pentathlon things, they got axed, and it's not inconceivable for our sport too. So we really need to be more proactive about it instead of thinking, well, we've always had it, therefore we're going to keep on having it. And that's our argument. Right. We've got to start to put together an argument now of like the benefits that we're bringing to universities, to communities, et cetera, and being ahead of that by, again, getting on social media and getting those domain names.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to try to finish on an uplifting note because now I'm depressed about esports being in the Olympics over swimming in 8 years. I was at a meet this past weekend, and swimming at that meet, I had the great pleasure of watching, I think, I don't think there's really, well, I hate to offend other athletes I've coached, but probably the greatest athlete I've ever coached, racing in the meet. The guy's name is Brendan McHugh, and that name might be familiar to a few people. He did win a U.S. Open championship in the 50 breast. He represented the U.S. On a world championship team. I was a very, very underpaid assistant coach his first year as an undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania. And he went on to have a really great college career. He qualified for the NCAA championships, scored a bunch of points at NCAAs. But the real amazing part of Brendan's story comes after he finishes school. Because probably some people have forgotten this story. Got a little bit of coverage at the time that he was, winning and representing the U.S. internationally, but he was in law school at the time. So he was essentially, I think everybody knows the time demands and rigors of law school. He essentially continued to train himself and get better at swimming through that whole time period. We've celebrated people like this on the podcast before. And he's 31 years old now. He's a practicing lawyer. And I saw him swim at this meet, and he's taken one more shot at Olympic trials. Now, he told me if he doesn't get a wave 2 cut, he's not going to go, which I think is fair enough when you are 31 and married and have a full-time job. But I asked him why he was still competing. And, he said to me that during the pandemic, he had a pool that was available to him, and, working crazy hours from home, that was his one outlet. It was one place he could go and sort of like get out of his apartment and do something. So he got back in, he started training again. He enjoyed training again. He realized, hey, I'm still pretty good. And he swam in our meet over the weekend. There were many curious faces going, what's this 31-year-old guy doing competing at this meet with kids? He won the 100 breaststroke. He went 54 with a full beard and a hairy chest. And so he's going to take a shot at qualifying for Olympic trials here in a few weeks. And I just think it's amazing. It's an amazing story. It's a lesson for all of us that, if you can find that sort of pure enjoyment on your own terms of the sport, that there's always a way for you to stay involved that doesn't necessarily be involved doing what we do, right? Coaching and or anything else around sports swimming. There's a way even for you to compete. So I told him I'm going to be cheering for him. I hope listeners of this podcast too will follow that story and see if Brendan one more time can sort of pull a rabbit out of the hat and make a wave 2 Olympic trials cut and go and compete in Omaha. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for being yourself. Thanks for enduring my jibes at my personal jibes at you. And I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.